The fallout continues after President Trump fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics following a dismal jobs report. Joining us right now is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, I want to thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Let's just start with a very basic question. The president said on Friday that he believed that these numbers were rigged, that they were politically motivated. Do you believe that to be true?
You know, as an economist, I like to go for what I can prove, and what I can prove is that the data have become very unreliable. As you know, I've been on this show on Squawk Box before I was here at the White House pretty much every jobs day for the last 20, 25 years, right? We would come up to New York and I'd be on set and we'd talk about the jobs numbers. And when I looked at the revisions that came out last week, I thought they had to be a typo or something. You probably thought so, too. And, you know, it's something that has been a work in progress for us at OMB and CEA here at the White House to try to understand why the data have become so unreliable. You know, there's some part of the story about response rates and so on, but I think it's really important now that we got a fresh set of eyes over there to try to modernize the labor data, because it has to be transparent, it has to be reliable, it has to be something the market can make big bets on. And right now it's not. When the revisions are bigger than the number itself, then you know you got troubles.
Kevin, here's the question, though, and I think we can agree that there could be a modernization effort, an effort to improve the way the numbers are collected so you aren't getting into this revision scenario. Perhaps the model itself needs to be rethought. Sure. I think there's probably a wide agreement on that. However, Janet Yellen said over the weekend that this is what happens in a banana republic when it's considered to be political to remove somebody like that. And as I mentioned, the comment, at least initially, was that this was a rigged effort, that these numbers were being politically manipulated. And so my question to you is, to the extent you want these numbers to have credibility and you want this department to have credibility, who do you think would be the right kind of person that would be able to reestablish whatever credibility you think was lost on Friday, recognizing that the credibility, if you will, of that group may not be as high as you'd want it to be on the sort of metrics of the numbers and your views that the numbers are not as good as they should be, but not that they're being politically manipulated?
Right. Well, first of all, they could be politically manipulated because they're so untransparent. There's a black box system out there making the jobs numbers that needs to be improved. Indeed, the UK saw a similar circumstance like this a few years ago, and they actually shut down the data agency for a month or so until they got their ducks in a row. The fact is that we had these blockbuster numbers for Joe Biden last year that suddenly we lost about 1 million of them after he dropped out of the election. The fact is that you know, I'm an economist, I'm not a politician, but when politicians look at numbers that make them wonder, then that suggests that there needs to be more transparency. So, for example, if I'm running the BLS and I have the biggest revision, really think about it, the biggest revision outside of COVID in 50 years, then it's incumbent on me to explain why in a very transparent way, to show how the numbers add up, to show exactly where the revision came from and what you're doing to address it so it doesn't happen again. If you don't do that, then you create a circumstance where politicians are going to wonder. And for goodness sakes, we know that hopefully not much in the data area, but all over the U.S. government, there have been people who have been resisting Trump everywhere they can. And so to make sure that that's not going to happen in the data agencies, to make sure that the data are as transparent and as reliable as possible, we're going to get highly qualified people in there that have a fresh start and a fresh set of eyes on the problem.
So, Kevin, what I was wondering was I'm ascribing all kinds of conspiracies now, theories to the president and calling for Jay Powell for months to be fired. Do you acknowledge maybe that, I mean, there were two risks from tariffs, and I don't know which one you think was more of a risk for the Fed. One is that the uncertainty that businesses had might cause something to slow down, hiring, capital expenditure. That might affect the labor market or the economy in terms of growth. And the other one was whether the one-time cost increases, you know, there could be retaliation, and it ends up being a second derivative, and it ends up being inflation. But I could see the president wanting lower rates as sort of to go hand in hand with a tariff regime. And then I thought if he insisted on it enough, which Bach, you know, basically put Jay Powell into a corner, he couldn't cut, then when the economy does slow down, you've got a fall guy ready-made for the president to point to for why it's not the tariffs, it's that Jay Powell didn't cut rates. Mm-hmm. Do you acknowledge that maybe there was a slowdown to be expected from the tariffs that maybe you foresaw?
Well, I mean, what we talked about on your show, Joe, is that we think that, especially at the beginning, that a lot of the tariffs are going to be borne by foreign producers and foreign countries. And that's something we've seen in the data. Again, inflation data are down now at the lowest level that we've seen in over 5 years. And so the bottom line is, I say, the frustration that the president has is that he believes that other countries have cut rates and the U.S. hasn't. And he worries, just as with the BLS, he worries that maybe there's some partisan calculus going on here. And if you look at the Fed votes, it's very disappointing, I think, as a person who's long believed in the independence of the Fed, that we would have Fed votes that were separated along party lines. It's very disappointing to me that the Fed would be putting an explanation out there for these unusually high rates, that there's this massive uncertainty and massive inflation coming from tariffs without actually showing us their work. Right. So give us the work so that we could actually give us the work. Show us why you think it is, and then maybe we'll be convinced and know it's not partisan.
Chuck Schumer wants you fired. So I don't know. He hasn't said that he wants you taken out like the Supreme Court justice, but he says you need to be fired because you're a flack. Which is unheard of with people in your role. We've never seen that before.
Oh, you're serious. You're reading an actual...
Yeah, no, this is where I was going to go with it. Because if you read the whole thing, Kevin, just because you probably haven't seen it, unless you did before you...
I can see it now on the screen.
It says Kevin Hassett should be fired. He's defending Trump's lies about the jobs report and the firing of Erica McIver. The business community should demand a flack like him has no role at the Fed. Interestingly, you don't have a role at the Fed, but... that's a separate matter.
Yeah. I'm sure President Trump's going to rush out to fire me today because he has such high regard for Chuck Schumer.
Hey, Kevin, let me ask you, back to Joe's point, though, just the markets seem to believe the revisions in the numbers more than they believe the original numbers. That's why you saw bond yields tumble on Friday. Are you in agreement with that? Do you think we are starting to see a real slowdown in the jobs market?
Yeah, I think the jobs numbers were slower than we expected. I think that one of the explanations for revisions is they have more complete data. And so I think it is likely that the revisions are a better read of the data if the data are not being manipulated. And so, yeah, I would say that it's a little bit weaker. But don't forget, this is before the big, beautiful bill is really kicking in. And so with our eyes on the horizon, we're highly optimistic about the future of this economy. We've got the big, beautiful bill. We've got expensing of factories, got no taxes on tips. We've got incomes going up $10,000 for a typical family. And we've got all of that happening while the budget deficit's declining rapidly because of the tariff revenue. And so there are a lot of really good reasons to be super optimistic about the second half of the year. But absolutely, that jobs number, if the revision turns out to be true, does suggest that there's less momentum than we thought. And you could say that the dissenters at the Fed saw this coming. They specifically mentioned that there were signs of labor market weakening. They were pointing, I think, to the ADP release as much as anything. And so, yeah, I think that the pressure on the Fed to get its policy in order is going to be higher because of this. And that's, proving that the president was right about it.
I want to go back to one thing that was said by the president, and I think you maybe referred to it as well, this idea that these numbers were politically motivated, and most importantly, that this idea that somehow before the election they were being manipulated. And the thing that I'm unclear about is the revisions came before the election, though. I mean, when I say the revisions, it looked like the economy started to actually peter out and wasn't doing as well, which I think to some degree might have helped the president. I don't know. Before the ultimate date of the election. Is that not right in terms of just the timing of all of these revisions?
The big 818,000 revision did happen before the election, but it was after Joe Biden had withdrawn. And so it looks, to partisans, like they were jacking up the jobs numbers until Joe Biden was out of the picture. I'm not saying that that's what they did, but you really don't want to have partisan patterns in these massive revision data items. And the way to do that is to have transparency so that people know where the revisions come from. And so I think it's a massive failure of our data agencies to be making willy-nilly changes that are difficult to understand and often have apparently partisan patterns. And so that's something that's got to stop.
Do you wish the president had waited a couple of days before making this decision and maybe coming out with whoever the next person was at the same time?
You know, I think the president has a better sense of what conversation he wants to drive and when than anybody I've ever seen in politics. So I don't question that, no.
If you don't have a suggestion for BLS, who do you think the next member of the Fed should be? Is there a short list? Are you involved in
Secretary Bessent is leading a list, and I understand that the top of the list is a guy you might have heard of named Joe Kiernan.
That's how the president pronounces my name, too. It's Kernan. It's Kernan.
I say Kiernan. Yeah, I got it. Doing my best. I'm 0 for 2 with names with you guys.
Yeah, exactly. You're 0 for 2, Ken.
You got to call me Keith from now on, I guess.
Yeah, Keith. That's right.
Kevin, before we let you go, let's just talk tariffs for a moment, because obviously we're going to hit this new deadline. I know it's not been suggested it's a new deadline, but it's coming on the 7th. What do you expect in terms of deals before then?
Oh, I think there'll be a couple of things finalized this week. There's been a lot of movement. But don't forget that after the reciprocal tariffs kick in, then what's going to happen is that we'll continue to talk, and there'll be more deals after that. But the reciprocal tariffs will be effective as of that date. And so I think that the president has put a lot of leverage over people with his reciprocal tariffs, and we're getting amazing deals. Think about it. All these countries, about half of world GDP has opened up like never before to U.S. trade. It's fantastic.
Kevin, one other question. A CEO actually asked me over the weekend, do you think that these trade deals are going to be open for negotiation in an ongoing way? Not the ones that haven't been reached, but even the ones that have been reached. So, for example, you know, in Europe, there's going to be a debate, I imagine, between the U.S. and Europe over time about big tech and digital taxes and the like, and whether the tariff piece in the future becomes a chess piece in that, meaning that either you move it, you move the tariff up as a leverage point, or you move it down as a thank you if they change things. So, and the reason I ask is I think there's a whole business community that's trying to say to themselves, how permanent are these tariff rates at this number, and how movable or fungible do they become over time?
I think for the most part that everybody should bank on it, that the tariffs are resolved. And, you know, should some country come to President Trump with some deal that's great for the American people, of course he's going to listen. But for the most part, the tariff uncertainty period is behind us. We've already closed deals with about half of world GDP. And the other half will get some more deals, and we'll also finalize the reciprocal rates. And then I think that we're more or less not done, because President Trump's always open for business. But I think that we found a sweet spot, really, where countries have opened their markets to our goods, and we're getting some revenue from them that is helping us reduce the deficit and maybe even give a little tax refund to people in the next reconciliation bill.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. Appreciate your time this morning. You bet.